"Hey, old man, go buy some coffee for me." New employer Christopher had no idea. I, who handled complaints at a temp agency, was undercover at the main office for the first time in 20 years. Focused on catching a crucial moment involving Christopher, I didn't notice the shadow approaching from behind. "I'm sorry, but could you get some coffee?" "Coffee, you say?" Understanding what Dorothy, the CEO's secretary, was implying, I felt heavy. "Christopher, you want some coffee too, right? Then I'll take one too, please." Christopher grinned as he jumped on Dorothy's request. Both he and I were oblivious to the hell Dorothy was about to unleash on us. "Hey, is this gas station coffee? We can't drink such cheap stuff, right?" Christopher didn't even try to take the coffee I ran to get. Instead, he sought Dorothy's agreement. I never intended to drink it from the start. Realizing the situation, the supervisors started trembling for various reasons. "My name is James Davis. I'm 48 years old. I handle complaints from temp workers at a staffing agency. Listening to people's problems was a fitting job for the old me, who used to be oblivious to those around him. It all started when I was in college. I joined a volunteer class club and helped at an after-school program near the university as part of our activities. Being thanked by the teachers for our club's assistance sparked my interest in matching labor supply with demand, leading to a career in staffing. I worked at a staffing agency for about 5 years after graduating. With the goal of eventually starting my own business, I saved the necessary money and built a network. At 28, I went independent, ready to launch my career. That's when I finally noticed the changes happening in my family. I had a wife, a former colleague, and a 3-year-old daughter. One day, I went home during work to retrieve something I forgot and only found my daughter, Patricia. "Where's Mom?" "Mom is never here," Patricia said. According to her, my wife left her alone every day to visit her friend's house. A quick investigation revealed my wife's infidelity. "From now on, it'll just be you and me living together." The day our divorce was finalized and it became just Patricia and me, she said, "I have no choice but to go with you." "But I really hate you, Dad." Patricia refused to talk to me for days. Whenever we had to communicate, she used a sketchbook to convey her messages. Especially around the time my business started, I had very little time to spend with awake Patricia. Her reaction was understandable. For Patricia's sake, I decided to leave the company I had just started, handing it over to the staffing manager. However, I was offered a job I could do from home instead, handling complaints from temp workers. It wasn't an easy job, but as I got better at listening to people's problems, the distance between Patricia and me also started to close. Over time, Patricia and I became a true family. 20 years passed. After graduating from college, Patricia started living on her own. It wasn't that Patricia wanted to be apart from me. I had moved to a remote mountain town to help heal Patricia's heart after stepping down as CEO, making commuting difficult. I was planning to spend time for myself, but those plans quickly fell apart. Recently, there was a surge in complaints from temp workers about a specific individual. Immediate action was necessary. Given the nature of the issues, I couldn't just contact someone from the main office to handle it for me. Without informing anyone, I headed to the main office in New York for the first time in 20 years. The company, once housed in a small office building, had moved to a floor in a large 30-story building. Now, with over 10 branches, its scale was incomparable to when I was there. I planned to enter the building disguised as a temp worker, but the security seemed stricter than I expected. A guard was stationed at the entrance. As I pondered how to get in without an ID, a young man approached me. "Is there something wrong?" His friendly smile suggested genuine kindness. Feeling guilty about deceiving such a nice young man, I pretended to be a temp worker confused about how to enter the building. "So, you're one of our temp workers, aren't you?" The young man suddenly changed his attitude, his smile disappearing. "I thought you looked too shabby to work in this building. You're probably here to complain about something trivial, right?" "Something trivial?" Nowadays, you can register as a temp online, and any paperwork is handled by the agent visiting the job site on the first day. You can even handle consultations through a chat app, so anyone who comes all the way to the main office usually has some petty issues. The young man waved me off dismissively. "Go home before you bother the security guards, old man." He spun his convenience store bag around as he walked into the building. I was in a tough spot. I wanted to investigate discreetly, but if that young man saw me again, he'd kick me out immediately. To make matters worse, a woman was walking toward me. She was striding confidently, her high heels clicking against the ground as she passed by. It was Dorothy, the CEO's secretary. If she spotted me, my investigation would be over before it started. I turned away in a hurry, walking quickly, almost running. I found myself at the service entrance. "Oh my, James." An elderly janitor who was about to enter the building called my name warmly. I didn't recognize him immediately, but my memory gradually returned. Could it be Maria? Yes, it's Maria. I'm so surprised. How many years has it been? Maria was in charge of this building 20 years ago. He had asked for my help when his son's job search wasn't going well, and I had recommended him for a temp position. We became friends after that. I was grateful for his memory. "I'm sorry, but I need a favor. Anything for you. Thanks to you, my son became a full-time employee. With Maria's help, I managed to enter the building disguised as a janitor. I arrived at the target floor and soon encountered the young man from earlier. Wearing the janitor's polo shirt borrowed from Maria, he didn't recognize me. As I emptied the trash cans, I listened carefully to find the person I was looking for. 'Hey, old man over there!' The young man suddenly yelled at me. I thought he had recognized me, but it seemed that wasn't the case. What happened to the documents that were on top of the trash can? Now that he mentioned it, there were some bundled documents on top when I collected the trash can near the young man's feet. Those documents were collected as trash. They're not trash. I just put them there because there was no space on my desk. My apologies. I'll return them immediately, I said. You're the one who placed them in such a confusing way. I wanted to say, but I couldn't cause a scene here. I retrieved the documents from the trash bag and handed them to the young man. These contain personal information and need to be shredded. Do it for me, will you? So they were trash after all. Got a problem with that? If personal information got thrown out with regular trash, it would be a major trust issue for us. Amazed at his attitude of complete self-righteousness, I reluctantly headed to the shredder. That guy just started this year as a new grad. His name is Christopher, the CEO's nephew, and he's totally arrogant. Everyone has trouble dealing with him. Maria whispered to me as she approached. I suspected as much, but the words CEO's nephew confirmed that the young man was indeed the target. Christopher Moore. Just a little more. I watched closely, hoping to catch a decisive moment. Focused entirely on Christopher, I didn't notice the approaching shadow. "I'm sorry, but could you get some coffee?" That unforgettable voice. I turned around slowly to see Dorothy, the secretary. "Coffee, you say?" Understanding what Dorothy was implying, I felt a heavy weight. "Christopher, you want some coffee too, right?" "Dorothy, you usually prefer tea. That's unusual." "Well, I'll have some too, please." Christopher grinned as he echoed Dorothy's request. "Hey, old man, go buy some coffee now." Both of us were oblivious to the hell Dorothy was about to unleash on us. Come on, convenience store coffee? We can't drink such cheap stuff, right? Christopher didn't even try to take the coffee I ran to get and looked to Dorothy for agreement. I never intended to drink it in the first place. "What do you mean?" Christopher asked. Dorothy just smiled and didn't answer Christopher's question. When it seemed like it was over, a man who was about to speak to Dorothy from behind saw me and raised his voice. "What is James doing here?" He was one of the founding members and now, if I remember correctly, the sales manager. Hearing my name, other early members who now held various positions started to realize the situation and tremble. It's very disrespectful to have James fetch coffee. We deeply apologize. The man bowed deeply, perhaps unwilling to make Christopher, the current CEO's nephew, apologize. Christopher, the one responsible, was visibly annoyed by this. "Is this janitor someone you know, manager?" "Know him? James is the founder of this company." "The guy who handles complaints?" The useless old man. Hearing Dorothy's clarification, Christopher sneered. Is that what your uncle told you? My uncle said you were an amazing guy, but there's no way someone like that would take on a miserable job handling complaints. My uncle's too kind-hearted. He probably couldn't admit you were pushed aside. Despite hearing I was the former CEO, Christopher's attitude didn't change at all, causing the sales manager to look increasingly pale. By the way, why is James here? Disguised as a janitor, no less. Only Dorothy remained calm as she asked me. I needed to see Christopher. Old man, you need something from me. What do you want? Recently, there have been more complaints from registered temps about you. I handed Dorothy a USB stick. Sorry, but could you? I'll print it out and give it to the CEO. Dorothy interrupted. She was truly competent. Even without hearing the whole explanation, she acted just as I hoped. Whatever you say doesn't matter. My uncle adores his nephew, so nothing you do will change that. That's what I was worried about. Christopher's uncle, John Moore, was 10 years older than me and had no prior connection to me. When starting the staffing agency, it was necessary to appoint a staffing manager. This role required certain employment management experience, so I was introduced to John through an acquaintance. Despite our 10-year age difference, John respected me as the CEO and treated me kindly. It was also John who suggested I stay with the company. However, we only worked closely together for about a year. If I reported Christopher's misconduct, there was a risk that it would be seen as a fabrication to secure my return to the main office now that my child was grown. That's why I secretly came to the main office to gather irrefutable evidence. I have something to confirm with you. Go ahead. Let's hear it. Was there a woman among the temps you manage who chose a job with no phone duties, only to find out there were phone duties at the job site? Christopher thought for a moment, then seemed to remember. There was a woman complaining that the job was different from what she was told. Complaining? Yeah, she was being unreasonable. Anyone choosing to work as a temp instead of a full-time employee already has issues. She was probably too picky to work as a full-time employee. Hearing his words, I clenched my fists tightly. I see. Don't tell me that woman is someone you know. No, I don't know her, but she's one of our important temps. Christopher laughed as if I had said something ridiculous. Important temp, right? What's so funny about that? She has APD. APD. Don't try to sound hip with abbreviations, old man. I took a deep breath and explained the condition to Christopher. APD is a medical condition. While it often doesn't show up in hearing tests, it makes it difficult to understand speech in noisy environments or under certain conditions. Because of that, she might anger customers during phone calls. So she requested a job without phone duties to avoid causing trouble for her colleagues. See, it's just an excuse. People think they can get away with anything by calling it a medical condition. If she couldn't hear, she could just ask the caller to repeat themselves, right? I felt dizzy from Christopher's complete lack of understanding. By repeatedly asking them to repeat, she'd end up angering the customers. Exactly. It's her fault, so she has to deal with it. If she doesn't like it, she should find another job. What do you think this job is all about? For the first time, Christopher was taken aback by my shout. What are you doing, old man? Our job exists because of the temp workers who register with us and the clients who accept them. You're just causing trouble for both. If we keep losing their trust, it will threaten the very existence of our company. I grabbed Christopher's flashy tie. I'm no longer involved in management, but this company is like my child. I won't tolerate anyone threatening my child. When I released the tie, Christopher collapsed to the floor as if he had lost all support. I won't tolerate this. I'll tell my uncle and get you kicked out of this company. Did someone call me? The sudden voice startled both Christopher and me. Mr. President, it's been a long time, James. It's been a while. You don't need to call me president. I was just standing in for you then and now. Although John and I had only been in touch through phone and email, it had been 20 years since we last met in person. I was worried he might defend Christopher, but his unchanged demeanor reassured me. Actually, Dorothy has been keeping the line open for me. I heard everything. Both Christopher and I looked at Dorothy in shock. Dorothy had moved a chair next to the copier and was watching our exchange with her legs crossed. While I appreciated John listening in, his aloof demeanor made it hard to express my gratitude sincerely. I've been too lenient with Christopher. Uncle James is right. Our job only works because of the temps who register with us and the clients who accept them. You need to learn this from the ground up. Feeling abandoned by the uncle he thought was on his side, Christopher clung desperately to John's leg. Why are you choosing that old man over me? I'm your nephew. You are my dear nephew, but I told you when you joined the company that I would treat you like any other employee and not give you special treatment. I thought that was just talk. Still refusing to apologize to anyone, Christopher's attitude exasperated John. I'm reassigning you. You'll be handling complaints for a while. Maybe then you'll reflect on your actions. Christopher was stunned to be assigned the job he had looked down on so much. By the way, James, I heard your daughter has started living on her own. Yes, she has. Thank you for all your help during that time. Thanks to you, she is now living independently. I hadn't yet told John about my daughter starting to live on her own, but since Patricia and Dorothy were close, she must have mentioned it to him. Thinking it was just small talk, I responded without much thought. I was talking with Dorothy, and we were wondering if you'd consider coming back as COO. I was stunned by his unexpected words. The more I do this job, the more I realize I'm not cut out for management. I admired your talent for leadership and decided to follow you. I took over the company due to circumstances, but I've always wanted you to return. Before I could respond, Christopher stood up. I don't know the details, but he stepped down for his daughter's sake, right? A man who prioritized his family over work can't handle being a COO. Before I or John could reprimand him for his outdated views, Dorothy acted. She slowly poured the coffee she had bought earlier over Christopher's head. I thought I'd let you learn the meaning of compliance firsthand. I shuddered, remembering an incident from 20 years ago. James, there's another cup of coffee here. Sorry, I didn't bring a change of clothes today, so I'd appreciate it if you didn't. I really don't want to take the train in a coffee-stained shirt. What makes you think this coffee is for you? You've had to deal with so many complaints because of him, haven't you? Dorothy handed me the other cup of coffee, clearly suggesting I poured on Christopher. I'm not that angry. I think I'll pass. Before Dorothy could say, then I'll do it, I quickly drank the coffee in one gulp. You're kind, but I'll never forgive this insolent new grad for saying, no matter how much she tries to look young, it's pointless because she's inherently unattractive, behind my back. Even if it was behind her back, the audacity to say that left Dorothy furious. She walked away, leaving both John and me shivering. As John had said, Christopher was transferred to the same job as me. Since no one else could handle him, I was assigned to mentor him. I thought he might quit rather than do such work, but he was convinced by his parents to quietly accept the complaints. At first, he made angry people even angrier and gave completely off-base responses. But when he finally managed to say, I'm sorry, even when it wasn't his fault, I was moved to tears. If this continues, he'll come to fully understand the severity of his actions. About 3 months after Christopher started handling complaints, John pressed me to decide whether to return as COO. Unable to make up my mind, I welcomed Patricia, who was coming home after a long time. I'm home, Dad. Welcome back. How's the new life treating you? I'm managing. As soon as she got home, Patricia sprawled out in the living room. Home is definitely the most relaxing place. Seeing Patricia's smile, my mind was suddenly made up. I was living in a hotel for now, but if I were to return as COO, I'd need to find a place in the city. Welcoming Patricia home like this would become a rare occasion. Yeah, you're right. What's with the sudden change? Patricia, unaware of my thoughts, tilted her head curiously. By the way, Dorothy said she'll bring back some souvenirs next time. Hearing Dorothy's name made my heart race in a bad way. That day, when I found Patricia home alone, I decided to take her to the office. Dorothy, who always worried about our family, wondered how we managed with work and home life. When I explained the situation to her in the car, waiting downstairs, she got furious and spilled coffee all over in the car. Since then, Patricia had been very fond of Dorothy, perhaps seeing her as someone who fought off the bad guys. Dad, are you coming too? Absolutely not. Really? Well, I heard I'll be getting a winter bonus, so I'll take you on a trip, Dad. For this kind-hearted daughter, I decided that I would always be here, waiting in this home.